Part 42. Could it really be being petted and spoiled, so I went to be a bad person? Xuan Huaifeng originally wanted to go find some business affairs, but seeing Bai Xuelan like this, he was worried. But it was not easy to leave, it was not easy to ask again, so he simply took the newspaper of the day on the table and put it on the wooden chair by the window. Sit down and pretend to look down. After a while, Bai Xuelan came over and asked, "What's new and interesting? You're so fascinated by it." "Let me take a look." Curiously, he leaned halfway, rubbed behind him, and smiled at the newspaper page in his hand. Xuan Huaifeng said, "What can be new and interesting? Most of the newspapers nowadays are only for making money. They are nothing more than touting celebrities from all walks of life. What society lacks is people who are willing to do real things." He put down the newspaper, turned around, and looked at Bai Xuelan. "Where did the call just now come from?" After thinking for a while, he said, "Forget it, it's just a question for nothing. If it's inconvenient, you don't need to tell me." Bai Xuelan smiled and said, "You fool, do you and I still have any inconvenience for each other? It was a call from the police department just now. Report to me that the gangsters who ambushed me have done the FA rectification. It's just such a trivial matter." Xuan Huaifeng felt strange. Didn't those gangsters confess that they were instructed by the surname Joe of the Flame Gang? Kill them now. How do they hold those people behind the scenes? Bai Xuelan said. What they said in the mansion, the police department immediately denounced the confession. According to the police office, even if they don't revise the confession, if there is any evidence or material evidence, it will not be a problem. What's more, the confession has been turned over again. Now that there is no witness, who is going to be held accountable? Anyway, the world is as dark as an old man, so let's keep our eyes open. After speaking, he squeezed half of his body over and spoke with Xuan Huaifeng, sitting in the same chair together. He picked up the newspaper he had just put down and flipped through it boredly. The world is as dark as an old man. Xuan Huaifeng heard this twice in a day, and he felt very uncomfortable. It was obvious that someone was paying for his life, and he even had a gun on his arm, as if Bai Xuelan had nothing to do with him. Xuan Huaifeng didn't ask about this, and felt unwilling. This world is really unreasonable. If even people like Bai Xuelan can't do justice for themselves, then ordinary people will not be able to make their mark. But, if you want to ask again, the facts are obvious. The police department and the underworld have colluded, and there is no evidence. What can you do? After shouting a few words, he couldn't think of any useful ideas, which only made Bai Xuelan more frustrated. It can be seen that being the head of the customs, with a bright and majestic outside, actually wants to do something that is beneficial to the country and the people. It is not easy, and it is a stumbling block every time. I can't help but feel a little sympathy for Bai Xuelan. Bai Xuelan was flipping through the newspaper when he heard Xuan Huaifeng sigh in anger. Healthy and Beautiful slanted over, glanced at him, and said, "Okay, what are you sighing for? Instead of sighing for those rotten grandsons, it's better to put these efforts to work. Save it, use it all on me, treat me better." "It's worth it?" Xuan Huaifeng asked. "I treat you very badly? How can I treat you better?" Bai Xuelan raised his chin towards the table. "Well, come and give me a sip of the tea over there." Xuan Huaifeng was both funny and angry. "So, what you said about treating you better is to have someone serve you with tea and water. It can be seen that although you have stayed abroad, but in your bones, you still have the style of leaving the old and the young." Bai Xuelan glanced at him ambiguously, smiled a bit subtle, and said slowly, "I am even a carnivore. How can I care about being a no-brainer? I'm really thirsty. If you don't help me, I'll get up by myself." Xuan Huaifeng saw his neck warm, afraid that he would say more and more evil things. So he stood up generously, his hands lightly patted it. I don't dare to work, get up. The adjutant helped the chief to serve tea and water. It was his share. He joked and walked over. The tea was freshly poured by Xuan Huaifeng. After a while, it was half warm and half hot, and it was just right. He thought that Bai Xuelan had been scolded by the police department. So he deliberately wanted to make Bai Xuelan happy. He took tea and came back in a hurry with his high boots. Please use it. He lowered his head, bowed his back slightly, and gave both hands to Bai Xuelan, but Bai Xuelan deliberately turned his face and said, I don't drink. Xuan Huaifeng wondered, what is this? It makes people work hard. Bring it over, but suddenly put it on a shelf? Bai Xuelan said, the tea that your adjutant served to the chief. But looking at the salary's face, the cup is full of ruthlessness. I want to drink it, and I only drink it. Kind and righteous. Xuan Huaifeng has known him for a long time. And he knows that he can't follow his nonsense. If he accidentally picks a wrong sentence, he will lead him by the nose until he becomes confused, so he doesn't step on the trap he set up. Just lightly said, I see. It seems that serving people is also learned, but unfortunately I can't learn it. I'm thirsty too. If you don't drink, I'll drink it myself. Suddenly light his hand. Bai Xuelan had already snatched away the teacup, drank it all with a smile, emptied the cup, and still gave it back to Xuan Huaifeng, saying, I have to work. I have to work. Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help but smile, holding the cup, and went outside for another drink. Back in the office, Bai Xuelan was looking down at the newspaper that he had never seen before. When he heard Xuan Huaifeng come back, he raised his head and waved at him, pointing to the newspaper in front of him and saying, come and see, now there is a shameless kind of thing. The old generation, who borrowed the name of a big official to make money for profit, actually borrowed it from me. Xuan Huaifeng was very surprised. For a while, is there such a thing? Who is so bold? When he got to the table, he walked quickly to Bai Xuelan's side, tilted his head, glanced over the newspaper, and read the 10 or so lines on it clearly. The color faintly changed. I saw the size of half a grain of peanuts on the top, with darkened black characters, and it was written prominently, the Chief of Customs, Mr. Bai, studied in France and returned to serve the country. He is young and promising, and is very enthusiastic about public welfare. There is a new primary school, for the orphans provided free education. Due to the lack of teaching funds, the principal came to the door to ask for help when he heard the name of White House's good deeds. He was immediately praised by White House, and he gave a helping hand and donated 3,200 yuan, so that the orphans would not be in danger of dropping out of school. Those who occupy high positions in the customs office not only work hard on national affairs, but also have such a glorious and public interest. How can my generation sit back and watch? We now call on all noble people in the society to raise some more funds for the orphans of Xinsheng Primary School. All the gentlemen donate generously and do good deeds together. This is the atmosphere of an open and civilized society. They actually borrowed Bai Xuelan as an example of calling, asking everyone to donate. Bai Xuelan said disdainfully, although it's not a big deal, I hate this kind of small person who lies. With such a character, even if he takes donations, can he use it on the orphans? Wait for me to call the newspaper office and criticize the reporter who wrote the article, and then ask him to issue a correction statement tomorrow to hold the liar accountable. Otherwise, the bullshit newspaper office will not be able to open the door. He get up and make a call. Xuan Huaifeng hurriedly held down the phone and said, don't be angry yet. It's not that they lied. Bai Xuelan said, it's not that they lied, it's me who lied. Xuan Huaifeng glanced at Bai Xuelan, and said, I caused it. As he said, his cheeks were silently red. Bai Xuelan was slightly stunned, looked at Xuan Huaifeng, picked up the newspaper again, glanced at it again, and suddenly realized it, and said, yes, this name sounds familiar to me. Xinsheng Elementary School, I met him in Shuyan Pavilion last time. Isn't that bumpkin headmaster from Xinsheng Elementary School? So, you didn't hide it from me and secretly donated money to them. Xuan Huaifeng nodded, and then differentiated. The man you met is the vice headmaster. He has a younger sister who is the principal. That day, the principal went to the mansion and brought up donations. I see her appearance, it doesn't look like a lie, she should be serious about education. So I donated her. Bai Xuelan immediately after paying attention, he said, that woman must look very good. Xuan Huaifeng asked, you haven't seen it before. How do you know? Bai Xuelan smiled strangely. Otherwise, you are such a frugal person, 3,200 yuan. Why did you shoot without saying a word? Why did you deliberately hide it from me when you met a beautiful woman? Xuan Huaifeng hearing these words with a strong vinegar smell, he suddenly became angry in his heart. After thinking about it, listening to you, no matter who I see in the future, it is a matter of course to report, otherwise, there will be suspicion of deliberate concealment. But am I the slave you bought back? Even if the relationship is a little closer, it does not mean that all freedom and human rights are handed over to you. Not to mention intimacy, even if there is a legal couple outside. There is no reason why one prohibits the other from making friends. Besides, in your heart, do I have such a bad character that as long as I see a woman, no matter how good or bad, I will immediately faint? Xuan Huaifeng became more and more angry while thinking about it. If in the past, he would have pointed his nose at Bai Xuelan and cursed. But now the relationship between the two is not what it used to be. When the relationship becomes complicated, the taste is different. There was a sadness in his anger. And the pain in his heart was like being slowly slashed by a knife. Although he was more angry than before, his articulation was more than 10 times worse than before. He grits his teeth, unable to utter a word. Just standing there, clenching two fists, shoulders shaking slightly. Seeing that his face was blue, Bai Xuelan was startled. He quickly stood up, stretched out his hand and said, don't take it seriously. Xuan Huaifeng slapped his hand, opened his hand, and turned to the office door to go out. Bai Xuelan hurriedly hugged him from behind, dragged him to one side of the sofa, pressed him down and sat down, coaxing and persuading. I made a joke, look at you, it's not worth it to be so angry. It's my fault, if you are angry. Just slap me in the face. His voice just fell low down. Snapped. He got a hot slap on the face. Bai Xuelan fell silent for a while. Seeing him staring at him, Xuan Huaifeng glared back at him, raised his head and said, what? Do you think I'd be reluctant to fight? I know you're a robber, so you can deal with me as a robber. Bai Xuelan with a wry smile, he said. It's not that I haven't been beaten anyway. Unconsciously, he gently sacrificed the big favor who was beaten last night. Xuan Huaifeng slapped him, but instead of feeling happy, he felt even more uncomfortable. If you want to do it again, being put on hold by him like this has disappeared the unthinking anger when he raised his hand just now. Besides, he is not such a violent person. At this point the only one left. But he wanted to leave, but he couldn't break Bai Xuelan's arms. He had no choice but to turn his face to one side. And resorted to ignoring tactics, his chest heaving up and down violently. Seeing that he stubbornly fell silent, Bai Xuelan hugged him tightly. Regardless of whether Xuan Huaifeng was willing or not, he kept rubbing his ears, leaning into his ear and begging for mercy in a soft voice. I do know I'm wrong. Good baby. You have always been a lot of adults, please forgive me this time. How can I not know who you are? If you see someone who likes the other, I don't look down on you, why do you chase me like this? Take your breath. You have 10 lives, and 10 of them will be lost to you. He added, as for why the newspaper said that the money was donated by me. I guess, when you donated, you used my name. This is your whole heart for me. You spend your money, and you buy my good name, right? Just thinking of this makes me happy for a while, and can't help laughing at you. Okay. The atmosphere was ruined by me. I also hate myself for this disgusting mouth. If you want to hit hard, and give me a memory. After coaxing him gently for a long time, Xuan Huaifeng's face slowly turned around, and he started to remain silent. Later, he couldn't take it anymore, so he said coldly, I donated my money. That person misunderstood. It's for you. It's nothing. What I'm wondering is that since the money should be enough, why are you asking for donations in the newspaper? Even if you don't ask, I have to figure it out. They once gave me a note. The phone number of their contact and the address of the primary school are written on it, but you have to go there and see it in person. Speaking of this, I suddenly remembered the small note with the phone number written by Lahua, which was put in the pocket of my shirt, and I didn't know how to feel guilty. When I got up, I couldn't help feeling my hand outside my pocket. Bai Xuelan was shrewd and sharp-eyed, and he saw it all at once. He wanted to ask what was hidden in his pocket, but the words came to a sudden stop in his mouth, and he swallowed it back into his stomach again, passing the time with gossip. Xuan Huaifeng said 2 irrelevant words to him, remembering his work. He resigned and went to the adjutant's room downstairs. It turned out that the official document to be approved had already been sent to the adjutant's office and was placed on the desk. Xuan Huaifeng sat down, read them one by one, and took notes while reading. Before I knew it, after finishing the whole stack of documents, I put down the pen. Only to realize that my shoulders were sore, and my eyes were a little bit floury. While rubbing his eyes, the door was suddenly pushed open from the outside. Bai Xuelan walked in without knocking on the door, and asked with a smile, Are you hungry? I've finished my official business, so I'll go back to the mansion. It's better to have an early meal or an early rest. The latter sentence is completely in Sima Zhao's heart. Xuan Huaifeng said, I've finished my work today, and I really want to eat something. But I don't want to eat greasy food. I really want to eat some jelly. Bai Xuelan said, What's so difficult? You go to the fan restaurant. He pulled Xuan Huaifeng out of his chair, called for the guards, and several cars drove out from the gate of the General Administration of Customs in a grand manner. Xuan Huaifeng and Bai Xuelan were sitting together, looking out the window of the car, but Xuan Huaifeng didn't care. Later, when he realized that the car was heading outside the city, he asked, Where is this going? Bai Xuelan said, Of course it is Fengshan Mountain. Xuan Huaifeng said, There are so many restaurants in the city, why do you travel all the way to the suburbs? If you look at the scenery, there are no maple leaves this month. Bai Xuelan said, Even if there are no maple leaves now, there are still other scenery. Yes, it's better than the city. I know that there is a fan restaurant on the mountain. The chef is specially invited from Italy. The desserts are delicious, and the jelly must be good. Besides, speaking of this, his eyes turned to Xuan Huaifeng glanced, smiling and pursing his lips. Xuan Huaifeng asked, What else? Bai Xuelan smiled and said, I don't dare to be careless when I speak in front of you. Otherwise, I will be slapped again. There are things to say or not, I still save them in my stomach. Right. Xuan Huaifeng turned his head back and glanced at his face. He is really handsome and charming. A young officer with a dignified appearance has a few finger marks on half of his face. Although it is faint, it can be seen if you look closely. Thinking of Bai Xuelan's arrogant nature, it is unbelievable that he can endure beating and scolding himself like this. Xuan Huaifeng wondered secretly. He has never been like this to others. No matter how big his temper is, he will do it according to the rules of human affection. Could it really be? Being petted and spoiled, these 4 words are disgusting to put on a big man. Xuan Huaifeng didn't even want to think about it, so he wiped the thought out of his mind and said to Bai Xuelan, I don't know when I cultivated this habit of hitting people at every turn. You know me too, you should know that I wasn't like this before. Maybe it's because no one taught me after my dad left. And my temper has turned bad. Bai Xuelan didn't expect him to think about his own life immediately. While laughing, he respected and admired him in his heart. Without waiting for him to speak, he put his hand on his mouth and said, if even a well-behaved person like you needs to be taught and admonished. I am so lawless, don't I deserve to be beaten to death by my elders? No matter how bad you are 100 times better than me. Xuan Huaifeng squeezed out a sour smile and said, you are better than me, at least the head of the family. There are still so many elders, it's me. He didn't say further, sigh lightly. Bai Xuelan pecked his lips, and said softly, I brought you out to eat to make you happy, why do you bring this up? You are too soft-hearted, and I'm afraid you will suffer from this. He was not afraid that the driver in front of him saw it in the rear mirror. He hugged Xuan Huaifeng's waist and took him into his arms. His lips were greasy on his cheeks as smooth as fat, and they rubbed together intimately. Xuan Huaifeng was not as crazy as he was. He pushed him away with a blushing face, got up and sat a little away from him. While tidying up his collar, he gave him a dissatisfied look. Later, when his breathing calmed down, he continued with the previous words, just now, what are you talking about? Even if Bai Xuelan was only a little intimate with him, he was happy enough. Back then, there was only Lin Qijun in Xuan Huaifeng's eyes. At the time, how could there be such a benefit? Although he kissed the face and was pushed away, Xuan Huaifeng was willing to take the initiative to talk to him peacefully. Seeing Xuan Huaifeng asking, Bai Xuelan smiled and said, you asked, then I will tell you the truth. Don't blame me for offending you with my jokes. Xuan Huaifeng said, just tell me. Bai Xuelan clapped his hands with spring breeze on his face and said, besides, I see other young people. Once they have close friends, they always go to play frequently. It's all a routine program. Now it's popular, and there are mountain climbing outside the city, boat fishing by the river, and an ancient poetry club. Before he finished speaking, Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help laughing. You suddenly started to study this. Bai Xuelan said, I just researched a bit, and I felt so ashamed. Since we were together, we never had the chance to play, and we were troubled by trivial things every day. Thanks to you, I still came back from studying abroad. There is no romantic feeling at all. Therefore, we should come out to play from time to time, and we should be romantic enough to live up to the good life. Xuan Huaifeng asked, according to you, the good life should be used to play. That's it. Bai Xuelan looked at him with a smile. It's a good life with both ups and downs. Without the sweetness of play, only ups and downs, what is it? As long as I eat enough sweetness, I will suffer. It's hard to live with. The more fun you make me, the more energetic I'll be at work. Others don't know me, you should know. Although Xuan Huaifeng knew that what he said was lewd, he also had a profound meaning. I chewed these words carefully, silently lowered his eyes and refused to speak. Bai Xuelan waited for a while, turned his head away to look at his face, and asked in a low voice, why are you silent all of a sudden? It makes people feel uncomfortable. The ups and downs are all yours alone? Speaking of which, it seems that if you suffer, others will not be in pain? The ground swelled up, his eyes narrowed, and he asked vaguely, others? Who are they? This hurts my heart. While whispering, the tall body leaned over calmly. Xuan Huaifeng had nowhere to hide, and was suddenly hugged tightly. The forehead, the tip of the nose, the cheeks, the lips, and the chin rolled over like a storm. Bai Xuelan was as passionate as fire, and covered it again, kissing deeply. Xuan Huaifeng was pushed by him on the leather chair in the back seat of the car, and he was half reclined. He only felt that Bai Xuelan's tongue was swept across his mouth, and he didn't let go of any place. When it was all over, his chest became more and more hot, and the lips that were close to Bai Xuelan trembled slightly. Finally, Bai Xuelan loosened his head slightly, turned around and bit his earlobe, panting with hot breath. Kiss. Just change the rules and give me a taste now. Xuan Huaifeng has already been kissed so badly, he seized the opportunity to breathe heavily, his chest heaved violently. He felt that someone was pressing and stroking him through his clothes, and he was so anxious to beat Bai Xuelan's chest with his hands, his head frequently turned to the left. With a worried expression on his face, Bai Xuelan understood that he was afraid of being seen, smiled, raised his head and said to the driver, "Pull the car on the side of the road. Adjutant Xuan and I are here to see the scenery. You all stay away. Don't make a fuss, it's broken. Let's see the atmosphere of the scenery." The driver knew the movement behind him long ago, and when he heard Bai Xuelan's order to see the scenery, he immediately parked the car in a large green space beside the road, near a dozen or so clumps and a half height. The shrubs that are not tall are indeed a place with a good view. As soon as Bai Xuelan waited for the driver to get out of the car, he turned on Xuan Huaifeng's shiny new belt buckle. Xuan Huaifeng still wanted to stop him, but how could he stop him like a wolf, like a tiger? If I dare to force you, I will endure it any longer. If I please you, you will let me have a good time. Okay? After speaking, his hand had already dipped under the fabric, so he didn't ask any questions, just did everything he could. Gentle, light and heavy rubs. Xuan Huaifeng was held in his palm like this, as if the gate of life was being pinched, and he couldn't struggle. After a while, the bottom was stiff, and while still alive felt pain as if he was jumping, and a numbness shot from the crotch to the waist and abdomen. At this time, he couldn't say no anymore. He opened his mouth slightly, leaned his neck back and panted. Bai Xuelan saw that the corners of his eyes were full of spring, his cheeks were red, and he was indescribably elegant. He couldn't bear it any longer. He skillfully took off each other's military uniforms and underwear, separated his delicate and fair thighs, and pressed them on without hesitation. I thought it would come slowly, but unexpectedly. The impulse at this time, how much self-discipline will not come in handy? The strong body that has been held for many days seems to have its own thoughts. The top touches the soft and sweet entrance. Like starving crazy. The wolf that saw the little lamb, the waist voluntarily sent it, and it went straight to the depths. Yeah, Xuan Huaifeng cried out in pain. The corners of the eyes were covered with a thin layer of water vapor. Bai Xuelan was hugged tightly by him, so happy that he was almost in the sky, while his desire was surging, and at the same time he felt distressed, and coaxed, "I haven't touched you for a few days. My strength is a bit strong, dear baby, you can bear it, it'll be over in a while." He swayed his waist and whipped his whip into the depths, so much so that his heart fluttered. And he didn't even have the strength to groan and protest.